but don't quit your job. Figure out how to supplement your income until you get to the point that the concepts have been proven, until you get that purchase order, till you get that REI experience, till you are selling enough product to a customer base online that there's some consistency to it, because it just de-risks. Like, all of entrepreneurship is largely, we're trying to create these asymmetric outcomes. It's like minimize the risk, maximize the upside. And quitting your job before you've proven out a concept is the opposite of that. You're maximizing the risk and minimizing the upside. Welcome to the Growth Mavericks podcast, where we know that entrepreneurship isn't just about strategy. It's about stamina. It's about disrupting your default and getting comfortable being uncomfortable so you don't burn out before you break through. I'm your host, Adam Callinan. Let's get to work. Our conversation today is with Maria Boustead from Po Campo, and it is a huge, critically important reality check on the startup life and grind. We're talking about what it actually takes to build something from nothing, not the highlight reel, not the headlines, the reality of, in this case, a 17-year grind, that people will look at as an overnight success, which clearly is not true. This is going from scrappy prototype with Home Depot parts to knocking on doors, through getting into REI, the business, almost breaking because of pricing and dealing with domestic manufacturing, having to go overseas, all sorts of market timing components. And this is where those important inflection points come in, some of which are really luck related, but you can't have the luck unless you're in the game long enough. So we get into big time co-founder mistakes, why people have a tendency to quit too early right before they get to that inflection point and they just don't know it's around the corner. And the uncomfortable truth that it can take a long time to figure out product market fit and figure out how to sell a product. These things just don't happen overnight. So if you're building something or you're thinking about building something, this episode is really going to hit. It's really important topics and conversation with someone that has been through it and is still in the midst of it. Let's get into it. So when you got started in Po Campo, were you solving your own problem, or how did the genesis story come to be?
Yes, I have a very classic origin story where I started the business to solve my own problem first and felt like other people could benefit from the solution. I was an avid city cyclist and I wanted a better way to carry things on my bike. With a backpack, you get all sweaty. A normal shoulder bag falls down your arms, bounces on your knees, annoying and distracting. And then bags that are designed to go on your bike come more from bike touring or bike packing, super utilitarian, and not really meant to be taken off the bike and used like a normal bag. Yes, they have handles and straps, but it's obviously like a bicycle bag that you're lugging around with you. And I really wanted something that I could put on my bike for my work commutes and then use as my normal bag throughout the day, whether I was going to the office, to meetings, out to lunch, out with a friend after work, whatever. And not finding anything with that kind of versatility. My background is industrial design, so product design, and I had worked at a bag company as my first job out of school. So I knew how bags kind of came together, and I was like, this is a perfect kind of industrial design problem. I remember the vision, and this is still kind of the standard we hold it up to for most of our styles, is that you wouldn't know it was a bike bag off the bike, that it really would be two different types of bags. And then thinking about people I was seeing on the streets biking, this was 2008 when I hatched this idea. It was more and more people kind of doing what we call everyday cycling, biking in their normal clothes. You would have the roadies in their spandex and kind of the super urban gritty dudes, messenger bike guys. But I felt like there's a lot more people like me that were just enjoying biking, kind of living a sustainable lifestyle, getting around by bike, and not really seeing one, kind of that crossover product that would help you integrate biking into your daily life, and two, a brand that would be more about just kind of the joy of city riding. And so I had been kind of wanting to do my own thing, and that felt like the perfect concept to launch Po Campo with.
What city were you in 2000?
Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm from Chicago originally. That's where I started Po Campo. Now Chicago has some nice bike lanes and stuff. That was very early on for kind of the bike lane concept. One thing that made Chicago very bikeable, and it's still this way, is that it's one, very flat, and two, it's on the grid system. So if there's like a busy street, one block over is a residential street that's going exactly the same way. So it's easy to kind of like find a pretty safe way to get around. And because it's flat, this was before e-bikes, it was easy to bike without it being too much of a hardship.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chicago is perfectly flat for that. How did you get from that very first concept? Like, can you walk me through, like, did prototyping? Did you like sew one up in your living room, or did you
Oh,
hire a
yeah, I
design
actually, like,
as
at
a
the
with
beginning.
your design background?
Yeah, like, so let's say, like, I had the concept in, like, September of 2008, let's say, I don't remember exactly, but it was kind of summer, fall-ish, and then we launched the next spring, like, maybe April, May, maybe May, because I remember us doing stuff around Bike Month. So, like, the time between those 2, like, I'm now looking back, I'm like, "Wow, we actually did that pretty fast." The first thing I did was I recruited a co-founder, and I remember putting together this presentation, and it was, like, very huge vision. We went to industrial design school together, we worked at the same company. I felt at that time we were very different and that I like to say I paint with a big brush, but she's very good at little details. So we joined forces. We kind of like talked about what we wanted to do. We made a little focus group with friends, kind of came up with a rough idea. The first concept she just made out of fabric and it was stapled, glued. We used hardware from Home Depot, but really just to kind of like test the concept with people. And once we felt good about that idea, the next challenge was how to make them. Neither of us wanted to be a bag manufacturer, nor did we have the equipment to do it. So it was like, how are we going to make them? We don't want to make 1,000, because we're just kind of testing this idea out. We were in Chicago, which is a large city. It seemed like there should be somebody in Chicago that can make these for us. And I remember like going through Google, maybe even the Yellow Pages then, and the only bag people we could find were just like very basic, like cotton totes that you would get for free at a grocery store or something. And our design was much more kind of handbag. And we were really feeling like we were running into a wall with it. I was like, I know it exists here somewhere. And I asked a friend who's Korean American, and she had worked for Fossil doing bags and had like recently been laid off. Could you help us? Yeah, I know you know what we're looking for. You got some time. And she talked to her mom, who said, talk to the mechanic. He knows everyone in the Korean American community. She went to get her oil changed. She asked them, and he's like, oh, yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Lee. They used to make luggage for Toomey. They're in my church. I know, it's so random. And then so she arranged for us to meet Mr. and Mrs. Lee, brought their son to be a translator. We showed them like our drawings, our rough prototype. They made rough samples for us, just like in black, that we used to do some more user testing during our design process that we were taught. We made some more refinements to the design, sourced some more fabrics. They made our first like sales samples, which I took around to bike stores, literally like knocking on doors, just going in with like the samples and some rough pricing. And we were elated that we got into 12 bike stores that first spring. It was so exciting. And then we had to find a real factory so that we wouldn't be making them all one at a time. And the Lees introduced us to a small cut and sew factory from another Korean woman. Her bread and butter was doing like pager cases for
All right.
Motorola, like very simple folio kind of things. But she had everything set up. And she had a bunch of sewers and cutters and really kind of held our hand to figuring out how to do it. We had to source every little bit and bob, including the adhesive, which she used to like put things together ourselves, which was a big headache. But we did it and we were able to launch. I think we had to make 100. We had 2 styles. We had to make 100 of each. We made 33 of each because there was 3 colors in each of them. And we started with that.
That is an incredible founding story and series of fortuitous events, which is often how these things work.
I know, you have to ask.
Yeah. Let's go back to the very beginning of that, and we're not going to spend all our time in this rabbit hole, but there's an important rabbit hole there at the beginning that you mentioned that's a big pain point for a lot of idea people, early stage founders, people that solve, start companies exactly like you did, exactly like I have, where you have a problem, you solved your own problem. Suddenly we think maybe other people have the same problem, and it turns out they do. And maybe we can sell this thing to those other people. You went and first you said that you recruited a co-founder. Can we talk through that? This is a huge pain point for people trying to do it on their own, often think that they need to go find a co-founder and don't know where to look.
Yeah, and actually, I said Po Campo's 17 years old now. She only stayed there for 2 years. And so I would say, while we're still really good friends and we did compliment each other, it wasn't the best relationship, so maybe I can say, like, what I learned from that. I knew I wanted to do it with someone to share the work, and I've always kind of thought of, like, front of the house, back of the house, like in a restaurant. You have, like, some people who are just more, like, looking out at making the customers happy and telling the story and all of that, and then you have the people who don't really want to interface with the customers that much, but are more obsessed with, like, making a good product. And I just knew myself that I was more of liking to tell the story, so I knew I wanted somebody who was more about making a good product, and because I knew her pretty well, I knew she was that way, and that we got along really well, we worked really well together. And that's true. I think, one thing I underappreciated is how small, design is in a consumer products company. We were kind of taught in design school, good design sells itself, like, you're kind of the genius and you make this good thing, and they're like, "And my work here is done?" And so by having 2 designers that kinda work differently, I felt like we had a good foundation, and in many ways we did, definitely to get the product launched and feel proud of what we had. Where it wasn't such a good fit is the entrepreneurial life is really crazy, and I was, and very risky, and where we decided we were both unhappy is, like, an opportunity would come that would make me super excited, like, interest from a larger retailer, REI. Like, I did a press release. We were in, like, retailer and industry news, and REI called us after, like, 2 months in the market. I was like, "Oh my god, we did it?" That same thing that made me so excited, like, it really scared her, because all of a sudden it would be a much bigger investment that we would have to be making with our own money. And just everything felt like the stakes got so high so fast. And we realized after kind of like trying to meet each other in the middle, for 2 years, neither of us were really happy. Like, I was like, if I'm spending all this time, I want to, like, do it. And even with trying to do it like 50%, it was still beyond her comfort zone. So we decided to split. Now I appreciate that as, like, I think something to look for with co-founders is that they're comfortable with that kind of startup world where it does take a lot of investment of your own money and your own time. It could go down the toilet to be comfortable with that, or comfortable enough with it. And that at least you're on the kind of the same wavelength there, because that was a big point of conflict between us in the beginning that, we just ended up both not being very happy. I still really believe in, like, the front of the house, back of the house thing. And I also like The E-Myth is one of my favorite books. He had a trio. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but kind of like the one
I
person
am.
who's the visionary, the one person who's kind of the manager, that, like, just makes sure the systems are in place, and then the one person who's obsessed with the product quality. I think that is a really good trio. Without one of those, something's gonna fall apart. It is, I think, hard to. I never replaced her. Uh, there was times where it was very lonely and I wanted someone else, but I did kind of, like, choose my advisors to kind of play those roles to kind of fake a starting team or co-founder, so that you do have that different perspective and feels like you can then lean into your strength, knowing the other things are more or less taken care of.
Yeah, so it's more of like a supplementary structure where you can supplement the needs with outside people that are only spending maybe a little bit of time on specific issues. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
We functioned really similar at Bottle Keeper. My cousin Matt and I was very much the front of the house. I mean, we literally had like this Chinese wall in between responsibilities. I was
Uh-huh.
anything that a customer would see or touch. So like the website and the technology and the branding and the images and the emails and all the marketing stuff. And he was the back end of the house, really the manufacturing, the inventory, the finance piece. And it worked really well. I guess what we had was that he was very entrepreneurial. So we were both sort of collectively comfortable in that risk space. That being said, we looked at it entirely differently,
Right.
which is good. Like there's an important balance there where I was super aggressive and like wanted to run with my hair on fire all the time. And he was very, very entrepreneurial and very open to risk, but very conservative
Mhm.
about it. And that worked out really well because we disagreed on a lot. But generally speaking, the in between that we ended up on was the right place to be.
Yeah. Right, right, right. Yeah, and I feel that sometimes with my team now is I'm still just like I'm comfortable with starting before the whole thing is built, like so that it's easier to adjust. Our more conservative people will be like, no, we need to get like at least the chassis together. So if this does take off, we don't seem like we're idiots. So I do feel like
Yeah.
there's a push and pull with that still.
And there's the balance, right? Neither of them are right or wrong. There's a balance of risk and reward and time to market and the amount of time it's going to take. And that's interesting. So if we fast forward back, you get, the Lee family connects you to a manufacturer. Is that manufacturer domestic or are they in Korea?
Yeah, they were in Chicago.
Amazing.
Yeah. So for the first couple years, we manufactured in Chicago. And, we did all our own sourcing of materials. I mean, it's like a whole other story on its own, figuring out where to get everything from, when manufacturing of soft goods is largely overseas had moved away, and we were still importing things from Asia, but just like the zipper pulls, you know? And then trying to find things domestically, but often not being able to. But anyway, we would put it all together. For the first couple years, we made it with them. With our accounts, everybody was like understood the pain point was and our competition in bike stores was and still largely is just like very basic black bags. So they understood like wanting some differentiation and understood kind of the customer we were going after, the problem we were solving. The average like handlebar bag was maybe like $30. We were selling ours at first for 80. The $80 actually felt like a good price for this like really nicely designed, almost handbag style bag made in the US with, like, top grade leather and everything, like, I
Yeah,
felt like
that
the price
seems
was good.
incredibly inexpensive for made in
But
the US, like made in Chicago down the street.
yeah, I
That's
know.
yeah.
And then our larger bag, I think, was 140 or something? I'm not quite sure. Around there. But we were, like, 3 to 4 times the price of the competitive product or kind of the basic stuff, and there wasn't much in between. And so we heard a lot like, "Oh, it gets so much attention, but there's so much sticker shock." Everybody's like, "Oh, maybe I'll come back for a birthday or something," which you never wanna hear? And I did have this was in, How I Built This with Burton that, I went around a month later to, like, see how everybody's doing, get my reorders, which is part of our business plan, and ended up, like, taking back most of what we sold because it wasn't moving. Or it was just, like, dirty, because like, the bike shop guys would be, like, touching it, so, and I was like, "Oh, we can't have that." Not completely, but definitely did not get reorders, and, um, online shopping wasn't quite where what it is now, where we started in store. We just had a WordPress website that was really just kinda like about us and some pictures of things and a list of the stores we were in. So we weren't really selling online. I remember we found like a widget. It was like a pop-up that you could sell on, and we used that for in the beginning for a couple years.
So this would have
Like
been like 2010-ish?
2009, we launched it like that. Okay. And I remember, okay, so the first year, we hit our minimums. It was out. We weren't getting reorders, but we were hearing it was too expensive. And actually, how we had designed the bags was very labor intensive, a certain iconic detail. Next year, we redesigned the bags to simplify the construction. We were able to bring the price down a little bit, like maybe $20 on each, but then it still kind of felt like it was an expensive bag for what you were getting, because it also seemed like a simpler bag. So next year, kind of having a similar situation, we're selling in some stuff. Maybe we're trying some things online or on Etsy, which existed then, but still like kind of barely moving our MOQ of 100 units, you know? So year 3, trying again, and this time I was like, everybody keeps saying they love them, but the price is too high. Are they just saying that to be nice? Because it's not, it's just kind of a critique that's not anybody's fault? Or is that really the problem? So we started the spring with basically removing our whole margin just to be like, if the price was half as much roughly, like, could we sell them? And they did sell. It was so exciting. Like in April, we did like our test. We got reorders from stores for the first time. I'm like, okay, so it definitely is the price. And then working with our factory, there is just no way we could strip out half of the cost, like we were already trying to do it as affordably as possible. We did not want to make it just like a simple tote bag. I mean, that wasn't the concept for it. So it seemed just inevitable that we would have to move our production overseas. And our factory owner actually helped us with that. She had a relationship with a factory in China. And so she kind of like worked as our agent in a way, and took showed them the designs and everything, got the samples made. And since then, we didn't look back. Now, I will say that first factory was not the right fit for us, but having the more affordable pricing did feel like it opened a lot of doors for us. I remember going to a trade show and we were in like the new exhibitors for the outdoor retailer show. And we got purchase orders from REI, Title IX, these catalog companies. I don't even know if they're around anymore. But I was like, oh my God, here we go. Yeah. But it was kind of funny because it was before we even had the international factory like ready, locked and loaded. I was like, again, just like, let me just see if this works. So that was probably in August. And I'm like, okay, we got orders for these things. And now we have to make them and ship them in March. Here we go.
Yeah, you have to say yes to all
Yes.
of that. Like, you just figure it out. This is you build the plane while you fly
I
it.
know. I
Welcome,
mean, I
welcome to
always
the
feel like
ship.
if you
Yeah.
have an order from a big retailer, surely you can find somebody to make it for you, you know? That was my philosophy.
You figure it out. So it's such an interesting like place and time because 3 years later or 4 years later, you could have absolutely started it completely direct to consumer. And I only say that from the context of we did that. Like we were in 2013, a WordPress site with like WooCommerce plugged into it as a shopping thing,
Right.
building 100% direct to consumer business that didn't have wholesale distribution until 2018 intentionally. Like it was restricted intentionally. So when you first go into that wholesale environment as kind of the launch plan and you get the commitments and they sell the product and you bring it back or they try to sell the product that doesn't sell, or at least some percent of it doesn't sell, and you bring it back and you then go down the next 2-year long, it sounds like, rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to get the product less expensive, proving out that the price point is actually a challenge. Like, how are you funding the business? Were you funding it out of I mean, 3 years, is what normally it takes. Like people listening to this need to understand this is what normally happens. The headlines that you read in the magazines about some company that started last week and now it's making $1 billion are garbage. That's not how this works at all. It normally happens like this. It takes years to figure it out. So how did you as a business, make it through that period?
Well, we both kept our day jobs first. So this was definitely nights, weekends, and lunch hours kind of a job, task. One nice thing about soft goods is and it's a low barrier to entry, which is why there's so many options for it. All you need is a sewing machine, like you don't need to pay for custom tooling or expensive mechanical engineers or commit to like a 10,000 piece thing to amortize your capital costs, like you really you can need fabric and a sewing machine. So, and you can make small quantities, so our minimum was 100. And I think that's pretty common for the US. And if you can't sell 100 of something, you got a problem,
Yeah,
So
maybe we need to move on, move on to the
yeah,
next one.
it's not gonna work. If you can't sell 100 of something in like a year, your main season, then you've got a bigger problem. Um, so I think that really helped it. So we each put in money, maybe 10,000, maybe less. I can't remember. And then, maybe it was about that. 5,000 each to 10. It felt like a lot. Honestly, it felt like a lot of money to us at the time. But now knowing how much money I've spent on Po Campo, it feels doesn't feel like that much, but it did feel like a lot of money at the time, a little scary amount. And we did take out a small business loan at one point for maybe another 10,000, but that was the capital. So we were really trying to do things very efficiently. We were designers, so the expensive product design we did, obviously. We didn't have definitely didn't do any advertising. So, one, I think, benefit with the wholesale model is the especially then, brands weren't really expected to do advertising or promotion. I mean, that's what you have the retailer for, is they're the ones that put it in front of the customer, not you, you know? So, just knocking on the doors, calling the stores, that was kind of it for that, and doing a trade show once a year maybe, you know? So that felt, like you could see the payoff in that right away, you know? But it is, you grow very slowly because you are limited by what you can afford to do, and it's hard to kind of sock away money to pay for the next round of inventory if it's more than what you just paid for, So that took me a long time to learn that, to set aside money to pay for growth. Yeah.
There's two really important points in there, at least from my perspective, that I think are worth mentioning. One is that you don't have to quit your day job. This is a thing that and again, like, entrepreneurs tend to struggle with, and I don't know who started saying this, but they need to stop saying it. Like, that you have to go all in something on something, or else. Like, it'll never work unless you fully commit to it. And I think that is the most diabolical way to get people to ruin their lives, jumping in on something because it can take 3 years to get it to work, right?
Honestly, Adam, I don't feel like it started to work until 2 years ago.
Okay.
I do think, and I think me and my co-founder appreciated the time it would take to figure out the right fit. Just understanding the product process, like the first time you make something and then you put it in front of customers, it's not going to be right. As much as hard as you try to like get it right, it just never is. And I have this like, of course we tested everything, but like my maiden voyage with my new bag, and it fell off my bike. Oh my God, that was just like, it didn't fall off, but it fell to the side, and I was like, 'cause "Oh, no," and our handlebar bag had these, like, cute magnets at the top, but if you went over a bump a certain way, it opened and everything in the bag went flying out, and so that was round 1. And so I think, like, we anticipated that, and, wanted to give ourselves kind of the space to be able to fine tune and continue to improve, and wait until we were closer to be like, "This is the product. No, it's a good product, people are buying it," before quitting. It was when we started to move to Asia, my colleague or my co-founder was less interested in that. I think she really liked the real Chicago bread and made in Chicago, that we could go down to the factory, like bike to the factory if we want. I think that was a lot of the appeal of the business to her, was that it was kind of more like homespun feeling. Knowing that we wouldn't be able to work with them, I think and that was who she would work with the most. I think that kinda lost some interest. Moving overseas, the MOQ went from 100 to 1,000, which was way too high, but she wasn't willing to take that leap. I was more than happy to, so we could kinda see it, like, fraying, and then when I went to that trade show and I got all those orders, I was like, "Okay, here we go," and so that's when I quit my job,
Mhm.
feeling like I wanted some daytime hours to devote to it. It was, especially being like the face of it, it was just too hard to try to like cram everything in during a lunch hour. I felt guilty with my employer because I really loved the company I was working with and I loved my job there, but feeling like I was kind of like stealing time more than I should have, so it wasn't fair to them either. And also feeling like a lot of the work was really similar. So I would kind of like work on these projects during the day at my job, and it was kind of like the same kind of projects at night. And it just felt like my brain was need a little bit more of a balance. My escape job, and I feel like everybody has one. I'd love to hear yours. Like when you're like, screw this, I'm just going to do this instead. Mine was always working in a fancy French restaurant because with my other job, we did a lot of business travel. And we would go to nice restaurants, and I was like, "Dang, these servers make a lot of money in tips," you know? And so that was always gonna be my escape, and so that's what I did. I got a job waiting tables at that year's, like, restaurant of the year. It was this French bistro, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is perfect." The restaurant opens at 5. I'm only gonna work 4 days a week. I didn't make as nearly as much as my old job, but I made enough for, like, my part of my household contribution part, you know? And that was kind of how I did my off-ramp was I worked there for maybe 6 months, 8 months, and it was good in that I had money coming in still. Po Campo wasn't paying me. It was many years still for it to pay me as much as that French restaurant job, but it gave me kind of my off-ramp where I felt like I was still making money. Um, that wasn't Po Campo, but I could cover what I needed. It was different enough where I felt like I could totally use a different type part of my brain. I found it energizing in a way, and it taught me some really killer life skills that were so helpful for Po Campo at that time. I don't know if you've waited tables much, but the one that I still feel like I'm using is like you go out, you check your section, it's 6 o'clock, one table is there, no problem. You go, you get their glass of wine, you come back, your whole section is now full, you know? And like that you need to be in all these different places at once. Like it's not possible to like stay calm, batch tasks. I still do this all the time, batch my tasks, and then work with my colleagues to help each other out. This was a restaurant where you pool tips, which I love. So it was like everybody was into like making sure every customer had a wonderful experience. So if it's like I had a big table, I had all these like wine orders, I see a colleague going, "Oh, here's the list. Can you get these?" "Oh, sure, I got it for you." So I think between like not getting panicky, overwhelmed when like everything is happening at once, learning how to batch tasks, learning how to delegate, working as a team. It was so helpful to do that in a totally different world from what my normal world was. And I really liked like being on my feet. The time flew by. I felt like I got a lot of exercise. Like I didn't have to work in other like fitness or anything. And it was just like a really good balance. Eventually, it felt like I was staying up too late, I was still, like then, like, sleeping into 10, still kinda back to where I had, like, maybe 4 hours of, like, work time during the day, and so when we got into season and I was like, "It's actually these 2 jobs aren't working that well together," but I was able to start to bring in some money, I transitioned out of that and just to Po Campo and then doing, like, freelance projects.
Quick break, and this one is personal. Your ROAS is lying to you. I know this because mine lied to me for years. When I was building Bottle Keeper, I'd see a 4x ROAS or 5x ROAS, and I think we were absolutely crushing it. When we get to the end of the month, we'd see our P&L, and we barely broke even. Now, the dashboards and the platforms, all the things would say one thing. The bank account and the P&L said something entirely different. They were disconnected. The problem wasn't ads. It wasn't marketing efficiency. It's that those output metrics like ROAS and MER, they don't account for all the stuff that crushes your margins. These are things that are shipping and fulfillment, credit card fees, Shopify fees, the marketing agency we're using, the paid media itself. That's the only thing that ROAS accounts for. But there's all these other expenses. So I built this framework that starts with net profit and works backwards to tell you exactly how to spend ad budget and how the ROAS needs to perform in order to hit your net profit target. These aren't benchmarks. It's literally your numbers and expenses based on what's happening in your business. And best of all, I'm giving these secrets away for free in a profit masterclass that I created recently. It's the exact system I used at Bottle Keeper to get to over 60 million in total sales with just 4 employees and 0 investors, ultimately to a private equity acquisition. So you can find this profit masterclass at pentane.com. But for now, let's get back to the show. Yeah. I mean, the managing chaos while remaining calm is good for everything. It's
Yeah,
good for managing children. It's good for managing
totally.
relationships. It certainly is important in entrepreneurship and startups and building because it's just
Chaos. And, I loved I think this is so fun in the kitchen. It is just fortunately, that kitchen wasn't as, like, bad as some of the kitchens you hear about, but it is totally a shit show in there, like, you know? And, you're put on your face, you go out, and I felt like another thing, was learning how to spin when something goes wrong to be like a good thing to the customer. I feel like I do that all the time now too, like, okay, what happened was the chicken fell on the floor or like they ran out of this and they made it or whatever, but then you're like, oh, the chef came in and wanted to make this change. Oh my God, the chef did that. Oh, of course I'll wait another 20 minutes, So yeah, I just feel like that was really good.
Yeah, I
Sketchy.
mean, and it sounds like a really great way to create that in between and off ramp. And again, going back to this is kind of why I believe it to be so dangerous to just quit your income and dedicate to this thing that's entirely unproven. Because even though, you didn't pay yourself for a number of years in Bottle Keeper, we didn't pay ourselves for the first 2 years either. Most of the time that's what happens unless you go raise a boatload of money. And that creates all sorts of other issues because there are not constraints in that business.
Right.
There's so much value in the constraints that exist in starting up and self-funding as much as you can and using loans and like bootstrapping along the way. But don't quit your job. Figure out how to supplement your income until you get to the point that the concepts have been proven, until you get that purchase order, till you get that REI experience, till you are selling enough product to a customer base online that there's some consistency to it, because it just de-risks. Like all of entrepreneurship is largely, we're trying to create these asymmetric outcomes. It's like minimize the risk, maximize the upside. And quitting your job before you've proven out a concept is the opposite of that. You're maximizing the risk and minimizing the upside.
Yeah, totally. And what you just said about consistency in revenue, um, is such a huge thing, and I think it does take a long time before you get there, Even as the business was growing, like, I think year 1, we did, like, 27,000, maybe year 2, 80,000, like, it was not huge amounts of money, but it still felt like we weren't selling through our MOQ, we weren't getting the reorders, and once that starts to happen where there does feel like some predictability in the revenue, it does change the calculation so much, and it feels less risky, because each time you're like, hopefully we can sell these things,
It is inherently less risky.
Yeah.
It does change the calculation. It offsets that risk imbalance that is important. That's what we need to be seeking out. So you said that you don't feel like it has really been working until like the last 2 years. What changed? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm feeling like we've got some product market fit, and it does feel different.
That's amazing.
It
So
really
what changed?
does.
I mean, it's you're 15
Well,
or
that's okay.
maybe
I'll do
17
I'll
years
tell
in.
this quickly. So we started in 2009. I'll say for that first 10 years, it was really slow going. Yes, more people were biking, but it felt like a lot of the conversations we would be having with people would first like try to convince them to bike in Chicago and then convince them to like carry their groceries or their lap. It was just like a lot of convincing we had to do. That the people who were like looking for us got them quick, but felt like the market, it was too early, I guess. It was too early for the market. And during that time, I still believed in it, but we diversified our product line to do other kind of functional, stylish bags for that same consumer. So we did like yoga bags, weekender bags, diaper bags at one point. And we did grow with that, but it became like all those are, because we're still largely wholesale then, all those are like different trade shows, and so while we were growing and I had a small team, we were all feeling like fried. And at the same time, the biking stuff, which is what started the whole thing, was kind of like just on the back burner. So when bike shares started to hit, this was like 2015, 2016, like New York, Chicago, everywhere. That really dropped down the barrier for people to try biking. And that really felt like a moment for us to just go back to the beginning. So we slimmed down our line, got rid of almost everything else, cut all those relationships with all those other stores. Like I said, I had 2 employees. I was feeling like they were both kind of fried. And so we split. One went to grad school, one wanted to double down on their acting career. I moved to New York and it was like reboot, and just really focusing on the bicycle products and really perfecting them, getting the supply chain that we're making in Asia, like really working on through that. My vision was always like, as it got more and more popular, more people would leave their cars, get in the bike lane. There would be a soft goods brand that really represented this major consumer shift, like how you think about Lululemon for yoga or Burton for snowboarding or Aero for skateboarding, and I wanted Po Campo to be that. So that was kind of always my vision. In 2018, 2019 was the big micromobility boom with the e-scooters and so much in e-bikes, mostly e-scooters. So much VC money was now just being like pumped into this category.
That was like the bird scooter days.
Yeah,
And
totally.
they went from like obscurity to $1 billion valuation in a
Yeah,
week.
I mean, it was crazy. Like these companies would just like drop 10,000 scooters in a city and be like, "Have fun,
Yeah,
everyone."
good
So it
luck.
was like a lot of chaos, but it was like transformed how people were getting around in those places. And part of that was for part of the companies hired lobbyists to lobby for better infrastructure so it would be safe. Because obviously, if it's not safe, fewer people are going to do it. And that would make it better for, normal biking too. So it really felt like a shift where a lot of energy and excitement was coming in. So that's when I decided to raise my first friends and family round. Um, I raised about $500,000. It took me a couple years, 2019 through 21. But with that first kind of chunk of money, I hired my first marketing person and we together refreshed the brand and the product, did some research. It made it less pursy and more kind of like outdoor bag, and relaunched everything in the beginning of 2020. March 9th, 2020, and then COVID happened, which at first was scary for everyone, but then the bike boom happened. So, like, we just, like, took off, and so for like that first 10 years, I kind of felt like I had just been like building out my boat, and then like I just happened to put up my sail at just the right moment where it was like, poof, you're off. And we've been growing awesome since then. And with e-bikes continuing to grow, I do think of that's the horse we're hitching our wagon to because weight doesn't matter anymore on an e-bike. So people are like wanting to carry things with them. Even people who've been biking forever, their shift to an e-bike feels like a new chapter in their biking life. And so they're evaluating brands that maybe they weren't thinking about before. And Po Campo's on and off the bike thing just works so well with that lifestyle. So I think that what makes it feel like it took until the last 2 years was like the market got to where the product made sense was the main one. But then also the team I have now is really solid, so like the market happened, but then Po Campo also felt perfectly ready for it. That it just has been working really well. I'm glad I stuck it out so long. There's many
Yeah.
times where I was
Oh
like,
man,
"This isn't happening."
this is
I just
like
always knew it would.
that story is like my mantra. It's like where I spend so much time and why I do this podcast. And like this literally is like the perfect exact example of why, and we'll get into this, but like everybody listen. The amount of time that it took for Maria to get to from startup in 2008, 2009 to the point where that true like first real inflection point where things went from like we're doing it, we're still kind of figuring out to like holy cow, we're on rocket ship, like hang on. That amount of time,
14 years roughly.
yeah, like holy cow, that it can take that long. Maybe it takes 2 years. I mean, for Bottle Keeper, it took us about 2 years for that to happen. But
Mhm.
like the whole point of this podcast is to help people understand things that they can do and need to do in their lives in order to be able to survive the ups and downs and the chewing on glass and like all the things that go with being an entrepreneur to remain in the game long enough for that thing to happen. Like
Yes, and
it's
I
the
think
key.
there are some entrepreneurs that are willing to really suffer for a quick, hopefully, payoff. Like, the next 2 to 5 years of my life are just gonna be awful because I'm gonna be working all the time, have these VCs breathing down my neck, but hopefully, I'll emerge on the other side a 100 millionaire or something, That's never that would I've just have never had that feeling, of wanting my life to suck for 2 to 5 years. And I think it is and I don't always bring this up, I don't want it to I hope it doesn't sound like I'm playing a sickness card, but I was diagnosed with MS when I was in my early 20s, and I've been blessed where it's been an extremely mild case, But earlier on, there were 2 times where, like, I couldn't use the left side of my body, and it happens fast. Like, you're like, "Oh god, it's here, it's happening," you know? So I think I always kinda had this feeling like I might wake up someday and not be able to walk again. That's like, I don't think that's gonna happen. Everybody, I'm doing great. But that's just part of the reality of having a disease like that. And so the idea of like, here I am healthy, but I'm going to intentionally submit to a crappy life for 2 to 5 years to be able to what exactly at the end? Like it's never been something to think about. Okay, that's not to say that Po Campo's been all sunshines and rainbows. I do feel like it sucks, honestly, a lot of the time. I have to be careful who I talk to on some days because if I talk to like an aspiring founder on a bad day, I'll be like, "Don't do it. You'll regret it for the rest of your life." But I think I do feel like I have my dream life right now, and that I'm proud of the stuff we're putting out there. It helps me bike more. It helps our customers bike more. Biking gives you a feeling of freedom and strength and joy that we can all benefit from every day. And so I'm proud to help people do that, And while there's a lot of stress with cash flows still, and blah, 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 tariffs or whatever, I mean, that never goes away. I do feel like by this time, I definitely have like my sea legs, and it's less like of an existential crisis and more like, okay, we've been through something like this before. This is how we're going to address it. And so that we can still kind of have fun, you know? Oh, can I show you something?
Absolutely.
We made a board game. It's called
Amazing.
Terroriff. This is for internal use only. What you do is and this is just an example of trying to have fun during those shitty times.
Yeah.
So I happen to have it right now. So what we did was our team member who was on supply chain had to deal with the tariff situation the most, like once we kind of like decided on the plan, she had to kind of execute it and deal with all of it. And we always felt bad for her. So me and my head of sales, who's a hilarious person and very creative, we would joke about how like you feel like you have this like weight around your neck. And wouldn't it be funny if there was like a board game where you're like playing Risk, and moving your boats across the ocean. And then when you get to your warehouse, that's when you see your tariff rate and it could like set you whatever. I'm like, oh my God, that's totally how it is. Okay, so we invented this board game. It's actually pretty fun. But it is like that. So you start it in Vietnam, which is where our factory is. You go across the ocean. As you go, I'm sorry, in the beginning of the game, and you can cut this part out.
No, this is great. I love it.
I almost like want to show you because we're very proud of it. Roll the dice, pay the duty. Who will be the first to import their Po Campo bags? And at what price? Because that's really how it feels.
Dynamic and
And so you
changing
start,
constantly.
you choose your player. They're all like Po Campo team players. You get your lingering sense of doom necklace. You choose your tariff rate from the pile. You put it in your necklace. And then as you go through this route, you're just rolling a die. If you land on the Grim Reaper here, you have to take a poker chip, which we call the weight of the world in the game, and add it to your necklace. So you just feel like it's crushing you as you move through the game. Or you land on a slack space and then you pull a card, which is either something good or bad, but like it's totally something that has happened in Slack, like what or could happen, like into port 2 days late, tariff rate went up 10%, or like go back 2 spaces, or like, whatever. So some good, some bad, but you move through it. And then when you get to the port, it's customs hell. That's where you like open up your card and see what you have. And then you have to roll the die and like move back a multiple, depending on what your card says, like go back 3 times, whatever that is. And then you can like go through the report. You can lose your weights and get to the warehouse to end the game. Anyway, it's it's
That
very
is amazing.
fun. Yeah. And
Yeah.
an example of like how Po Campo handles the ups and downs without like knowing we can get through, but we can get through together and still try to have fun. I guess that's what made me think of it was the whole like white knuckling the 3 to 5 years until you can get acquired. Just not interested in it. And when I was trying to raise I called my friend and family around my pre-seed, and I did try to raise a seed in 23 and 24, ultimately unsuccessful. But I was talking with one of my colleagues who had worked at venture-backed D2C, fast-growing D2C firms before. And I was kind of like, I don't know, this is taking a lot of energy. A lot of friends in it who had raised money were like, oh, like kind of second wishing they could go back and unraise it just because of all the pressure it put on them. And they're like, do you really need it? Yes, you're not growing super fast, but right now, you can do it how you want. And I think it's just for me, raising the money the first time really helped me psychologically. I was in such bootstrapper scarcity mindset for so long, like the bank account is under $1,000 most of the time. If I'm going to do an advertising, any kind of marketing campaign, I need to be like 90% sure I'll see some return within 30 days or I'm out of business. So like looking just so 6 feet ahead, never being able to kinda, like, bring my eyes up and look at the horizon, and just feeling so cautious to, like, trying to keep the wheels on. But then when I raised that money and then there was, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars there and I got some other people and we could actually be like bring our eyes up and be like, "This is where we wanna go in 5 years. What should the first step be?" And being able to try some different things, and if it didn't work out, it didn't mean the business was over. We could, like, learn from it and do it a little bit better the second time. It was such a game changer for me. I'm glad that didn't happen right away because was able to learn a lot in the
Yeah.
bootstrapping years. Po Campo definitely would not be here now if I did not have that money to kinda, like, free me up, and I think when I saw that money go back down, I started to feel like, "Oh, no, here I go back to the bootstrapper ways where everything is just, like, counting the dollars and stress, stress, stress," and so when investors were like, "Why are you raising the money?" Like, I think the truth for me was that I just feel like I can run a better business when there's money in the bank, but that's not a reason to raise money, I know that. But you could hire other people that could maybe make things happen faster, and faster's fun to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
To an
But anyway,
extent.
I talked with her and I was like, "So what is it like to be a part of a VC funded team?" And I thought it would be kind of like fun because you could just like do whatever you wanted to do, and have the budget. And she like paused and then she's like, I guess I would describe it as soul crushing. And I was like, such the opposite phrase than I was expecting. And she said it like she called it soul crushing just because of the pressure. She's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do whatever, but like the numbers you're expected to hit are so huge, that you're like, like every 10 minutes are like, I need to get, an extra 10,000 every 10 minutes. If I don't, how am I going to hit my number this month? And that was a real wake-up call for me because I don't want anybody to look back at their time at Po Campo and describe it as soul crushing. Like, my goal is that Po Campo is your best job your whole life. I know it probably won't be your only job, but I really want it to be like, man, my time at Po Campo was awesome. I worked with great people. We made great products. It was exciting. And so I think that really like helped me like focus what I want to do for the customers, but also for the people I'm working with. And so being able to devote some office time to be doing some fun things and just
Absolutely.
like remembering these times together, I think is totally worth it.
Yeah. There, I mean, there's so much trapped in there. Who you take money from, it matters. Like the traditional fund model has timelines on it, and those may not align with your timelines. And that's really, really important to understand if you're going into that thing. And that's where the soul crushing part of that comes, is needing to meet a timeline that is not yours anymore.
I know. I mean, like the timeline sounds great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If we can do this for 3 years and then I never have to work again, or I make all this money that I could do something else really cool, like that sounds awesome. I actually think part of the reason I didn't raise money is that people knew I wasn't up for it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I realized it until I stopped and started talking with other people. I was like, because I want to enjoy my life too much. I mean, it's true. I like, it is just is, you
Yeah.
know?
Only get one of them.
You're right.
Like, as far as we know as of now, that's you only get one of them. You might as well spend it doing things you like.
Yeah, totally.
Well, this has been epic. I really appreciate your openness and honesty and finding all the fun rabbit holes to go down. Where do you want people to find you and Po Campo?
For me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm relatively active on there, so it's just Maria Boustead, Po Campo. I do this thing with LinkedIn requests where I like to do 15-minute, 20-minute calls before confirming a connection. And so if you hear about this from this podcast, put in the note that that's where you heard it. The reason is I think it's a much more powerful networking tool if you actually know the people you're connected with. And a lot of the times it's like just obviously it's just, cold calling, mail marketing. I
Yeah,
just
of
ignore
course.
those. But periodically, like maybe 10% or 20% of the time, it's like this person has a lot of shared connections, or they're in an industry that I'm in, or they're doing a job that sounds kind of interesting to me. And I would like to know this person. I started to do this like in November. Almost everybody has agreed to the meeting. Like I just send them my Calendly link, and it's actually been awesome. I totally recommend it to everybody listening to this. I feel like you're at like a networking event where it's like, tell me a little bit about how you got here. I'll tell you like how can we work together if anything, and then have a nice day. Like it's enough, but I feel connected with all these extra people from around the world because of it. So yeah, so I like LinkedIn for that. And then Po Campo is just at pocampo.com or on Instagram, Po Campo Bags.
Epic. We'll make sure that there are links to all that. And that's brilliant on LinkedIn. I feel like that's like a forcing function that automatically selects out, like for, in my case, most of the LinkedIn attention or
Yeah.
I get it literally just somebody trying to sell me something. That's awesome. Well done. Well, thank you again, Maria. This was really,
Welcome.
really fun. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Yeah. For you too. I look forward to listening to the episode.
It'll be fun. Thanks. A huge thanks to our guests today. Don't forget, this is powered by Pentane Financial and Advertising Command Center for Consumer Brands. Stop what you're doing, put your phone down, walk away from the computer screen, go outside, get some air, do something hard, push your limits, get uncomfortable, become more durable and more resilient, create the stamina required to get through those entrepreneurial barriers, stay in the game for as long as you can, and we will see you next time.